Hey guys, welcome back to the Demczak Leadership Podcast. Thank you for being with me today, and I'm so excited. I am encouraged. I'm excited to share with you a little bit about my life the last 8 months and kind of what it's been like to navigate self-employment. And I think right now, especially the last 2 years, so many people are trying to consider the work that they do, and is it something that they want to stay doing? Or do they maybe want to make the jump and make the leap and go for it and pursue the work that they feel called to? And so I get the question all the time of like, hey, what's it like? Or I have a side hustle that I'm thinking about pursuing. What's your best advice? And so I wanted to create a podcast really around that question. What is it like to be your own boss? And so in this podcast, I'm going to tackle essentially 5 things that you need to know about being your own boss. And a little bit of my backstory, if you're not familiar, I was in corporate America for the last 5 years and had an amazing job. I mean, the company I worked for is such a great company. I think they just got voted as the number 14 company culture in America. So, I mean, we're talking about an awesome employer that was super flexible and was just so great to work for and to work alongside. And I, for 5 years, was in a sales role and did well and things were great. There was really no complaints that I had other than the fact that I guess a big issue was just, I knew I was called to do something different. I just knew that for me, being in a cubicle each day and, doing the job that I was doing, I just knew that it was a job that provided an income and provided for my family. But I just knew deep down, I would even tell people, I would be open about it. Like, I won't be doing this forever. And what's crazy is I was at that employer for 5 years, and really, really quickly after I started that job 5 years ago, I started a side hustle. And so I started a speaking business. And so I would speak at events on leadership, and all different topics. I had my first book that I published called Thrive You. So I started speaking on that book first. And that just led to all kinds of opportunities. I had the chance to even speak at that employer a few times. And so it was really interesting. I almost felt like I was living 2 lives a little bit. I would be at my cubicle at work and I would get my job done and try to do it to the best of my ability. And then I would get on a plane or I would drive to an event at a different company and I would speak on leadership and all these different topics. And then I would go back to the cubicle and, continue to do those both things. And for 4.5 years, it was awesome. And I was so thankful that my employer allowed me. They gave me the flexibility to do both things. It was awesome. And really, it was last September that I started to get these heart palpitations. And so I would start to just wake up in the morning and have a racing heartbeat, and for no reason. And I've never dealt with anything like that before. As an athlete, I've never had any heart issues or anything like that. And so it was weird. I would just wake up and I wouldn't even feel anything. I would literally just have the heartbeat going on. And so I shared it with my family, with my wife, and I went to the doctor and they did an EKG and they said, everything looks fine. They're like, you have no issues. Everything looks great. They're like, but what are you doing for work? And they're like, we think this could be stress related. And so I told them all the different things that I was doing, like all 7 things, right? Maybe like some of you listening. And they're like, well, that's your problem. And this is probably stress induced. And so they said, essentially what they said is you either need to scale back or it will scale you back. And so I did scale back. And so that was in September. Long story short, I'd just been praying and thinking about, do I want to make the jump and pursue this side hustle that I'd been doing for 4.5 years. I'd always kind of just viewed it as a side hustle, right? As something that was just a supplement income wise. It was something that I was passionate about. I knew I wanted to do it. And really deep down, I think there was this deep seated fear of mine that if I go all in as a speaker, if I go all in as an author and pursue the work I feel called to, that I will be exposed. And I didn't realize this, but this lingered for a while. It was this feeling of if I go, it's really easy to have the crutch of 2 jobs, right? Like I could do the speaking thing. And if I didn't do too well speaking, then guess what? I have my 9-to-5 W-2 income over here. And if I don't do good at my 9-to-5, then I could be like, well, I got this speaking side hustle that's going really well, right? And so it was kind of like this thing that I didn't even realize that I had this crutch and I had this I think, deep-seated fear of like, man, I don't know if I'm good enough to go all in on something, because historically I'm a guy that just likes doing a lot of things, and sometimes I do too many things, and that's a problem for me, and one that I have to reel in if I'm not careful. And so ultimately, I actually met with 12 different people in my life, just phone calls, Zoom calls, grabbing lunch with people. Out of that 12 people, there was family members, there was full-time speakers, full-time people who were in the mortgage industry, which that's where I came. That's what I was doing in sales, and I was just vulnerable and real with them. And I said, "Look, what what are your thoughts on this? Do you think am I crazy for thinking that I should quit this 9 to 5 comfortable benefits? Like, am I crazy for thinking this?" And what was really affirming, and I spent a lot of time praying and asking God what, that He would open and close doors pretty directly, and obviously just asked a lot of people. And what was really cool is I feel like there's a lot of answered prayers, and during that time that made it very clear in the way that I should go. But also, 12 out of the 12 people that I met with, including family, people that I trusted, people that I knew had my best intention. Like, they had my back, they loved me, they cared about me. They would also tell me the truth. So if I was thinking, of something that's kind of crazy, they would be like, "Hey, Alex, that's a little crazy," right? And so what was really affirming is that when I did meet with those 12 people, kind of share what I wanted to do, 12 out of 12, including my wife, including all kinds of other people, said, essentially, paraphrasing, it's a no-brainer. Like, you need to pursue this. You need to go for it, right? And so in December, I walked out of my 9 to 5 for the last time. And again, it was a great company, but I'm just telling you, when I walked out of that building for the last time, it was almost like a weight was lifted off. And again, please hear me. There is nothing wrong with that employer I was at. They are unbelievable. Like, they are the top at what they do in the country. And so for me to leave, it was, you're leaving a lot of money on the table, but there was this weight that lifted off. And for the last 8 months, I've now been self-employed, doing my own thing. And so that's why I wanted to record this podcast, because I get asked almost every day, "Hey, how's it going? How can I have a side hustle. How can I do it?" And so I wanted to create just talk about these 5 things, the 5 things that you need to know about being your own boss. And so I'm going to jump right in here. The first thing that you need to know when you contemplate this decision is, number one, is it is super freeing. It is one of the most freeing things that I've done. Like I just was alluding to, when I walked out of that 9 to 5 for the last time, a weight, it just came off. And I didn't realize how much, I guess, I put into that other job as well. I mean, which was good. I obviously wanted to do my work with excellence in both things. But what I realized is I couldn't do both. Like, I couldn't juggle both things and be excellent at both. And so what I noticed is I would be dropping the ball in some areas of my day job, and then I would be dropping the ball in some areas of my speaking engagements, maybe the details of the event, all the different stuff. And so what I had to figure out is I have to go all in on one of them, because I can't be substandard in both. Like, that doesn't make sense. And so what I've found out about quitting and now being self-employed, being my own boss, it is one of the most freeing things that I've experienced. I mean, literally, when Monday morning rolls around, if I want to go back and mow my lawn during the workday, or go to the gym, or do whatever the heck I want, as your own boss, you can do that. And that's a super freeing thing that I never would have been able to do in my old job, right? Like, I had a boss who told me, "Hey, you have to be here at this time. Here's the expectation." But as your own boss, like, there is some unbelievable freedom that comes with determining your own schedule and doing things according to how you'd want to do them. Now, on the flip side, that could also be dangerous, because you could go mow the lawn on a Monday morning, and you could go hunt, sit in a deer stand multiple days a week. You could do those things, right? And because of that freedom, it is pretty amazing. But there's also a flip side of, you have to make sure that you're being disciplined with your time in that way. So the first thing I just want to convey is that when you do make the jump, right? When you do make the jump from maybe full-time employment to, I'm going to be self-employed, be my own boss, it is very freeing, and it frees you up, your schedule up. It frees you up in ways that maybe you never even considered. Time that I can now spend with my daughter, where I would, back in the day, I'd come home late from work and would be stressed, and I fought traffic. Well, guess what? If I want to work from home for a day now as my own boss, I can. And if I want to go take my daughter to the park like I did yesterday afternoon, I can, and no one's telling me that I can't. And so that is an unbelievable feeling. It's very freeing. The second thing that you have to know about being your own boss is that you must be a self-starter. It is essential to be a self-starter because, going back to what I just said, you do have the flexibility to do these awesome things. But if you take too much advantage of that, right? And if you're not someone who can self-motivate, then you could have a lot of income loss. You could have some down months if you do that. I think about back when I was an employee, back when I worked for someone else, I had obviously a ton of respect, and I loved all the bosses that I worked for, but sometimes I would kind of just chuckle to myself at times where a certain boss would say things, and try to kind of give you a pep talk or motivate you. And it was all well intentioned, and I appreciated that. But just like deep down, I'm just like, man, like I don't, a self-starter can motivate themselves. They don't need someone else's validation to say, oh, good job, Alex, great. Again, those were great things, and I appreciated those, and they meant a lot. But at the end of the day, if you're a person who's a self-starter, you are not asking, hey, what's the minimum I have to do? You're just going out and you're, as Dave Ramsey would say, you're going out, you're killing the item, right? You're going to kill the animal, and then you're going to drag it home yourself, right? And so, that's maybe a little graphic, but for you hunters out there, you'll appreciate that analogy of just like, you know what? It's up to no one else but you. You have to go out, you have to go hunt, you have to go kill it, and you have to drag it home. And so that's the mentality you have to have of someone who's self-employed when you're your own boss. Because if you're not a self-starter, good luck. I don't care what business you do. I think about, just the things that you have taken care of for you when you work at a W-2. You have your insurance, you have your benefits. I mean, even something as simple as like a printer, I just had a paper jam yesterday in my printer. And so at my old job, what would I do? I would send someone a message in IT and say, hey, the printer's broke. Can we fix it? And life is back to normal. But in self-employment, guess who is in charge of the printer? Me. Or my wife, who I have to drag down. I have to say, hey, babe, can you, she's a lot better with IT and computers than I am. But my point is, like, the buck stops here, right? It's like you are the person in charge, and it's a really freeing thing, but you have to make sure that you are a self-starter. If you're not someone who likes to motivate yourself, if you don't feel driven, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, my advice would be second guess making a leap, second guess quitting your job if you're not passionate enough about it. If that passion doesn't drive you to be great at something, to be good and be successful, I don't think the self-employment path is for you. I remember a few years ago, I just Googled like how to know if you're an entrepreneur. I think I was in college when I Googled that. And there was some list, it was like entrepreneur.com, and it had all the descriptions of an entrepreneur. And literally every single one, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Like I lined up with all of them, and I'm like, okay, well, this is awesome. I know what I want to do. But if you don't have the mentality of, you know what, I want to, control my schedule, and not even just control your schedule, but plan out your days, like knowing, okay, tomorrow, I could choose to stay home and do nothing, or I could choose to meet up with 3 different people, have 2 Zoom calls, like it's on you to do that. And so remember, if you're going to go this path, you must be a self-starter. Number 3, the third thing you have to know about being your own boss is that you now have unlimited earning potential. Unlimited earning potential. So now the positives of that are just like it sounds. Like the harder you work in a lot of industries and most jobs, the harder you work, the more you can get paid. I came from a job where it was a base salary, and then it was commissions on top of that, right? So it was very laid out for you what you would make, how you would make the money. And so maybe some of you listening come from that. Maybe it's an hourly rate, maybe it's a salary. And so it's shifting that mentality to now when you go on your own as your own boss, it's shifting the mentality to, okay, I'm not really capped anymore. Like I could truly work as hard as I could and make as much money as possible. Now, the flip side of that is that can also work against you in some ways, like if there's a downturn in the market, or if you get sick or whatever it is for you. If your business is not able to operate, then the flip side is true. You don't, all of a sudden, you don't have a fixed salary. You don't have all these things. And so it's understanding that in some ways, as a Christian, I believe that, God grants me the gifts and abilities to do all these things, just like he grants you the abilities and all the ways he's gifted you. And so ultimately he's in control, right? But in some ways, you have to be the one to know, okay, if I want to go out and pursue this, like I have to take action. Like I have to move in that direction in some way to do that. And so just know, as a business owner and as being your own boss, you can make more money than ever you thought was possible. But the opposite is also true. And so just know the way that you get paid is different, And so back when you have direct deposit at W-2, guess what? I get checks in the mail now. I get sometimes direct deposit, but mostly checks in the mail or other ways. And so even just having people on your team that can help track payment, all these different things that you never think anything about when you're at a full-time job. Now it's up to you to think about those things. Number 4, the fourth thing you need to know is this, that your work and personal life can become very blurred. And what I mean by that is it's a lot easier when you have let's say a day job, you drive into work, that you then come home after a long day of work, you're able to shut off your computer, shut off your phone, be present with your family, right? But what I have found that it can be very hard about being your own boss is that, especially if you work from home or in some ways, if you're just always on, it can be very tempting to answer late night emails. It can be very tempting to just always be on or on the clock. And so what happens is you're sitting there watching TV or Netflix or whatever with your family, and then you're tempted to pull out your laptop. Because why? Like I said earlier, you can make unlimited earning potential, but that also comes at a cost. And so as we all know, money is not everything. And so for me, what I've had to do is try to put some boundaries around that and say, you know what, after a certain time, like I'm just not going to have my phone. I'm not going to have it with me. It needs to be in my office. And so that's what I started doing. When I go to bed at night, my phone is downstairs. It is in my office and I sleep upstairs. So that's just one thing I've had to do, because if not, it's an easy temptation for me to always be on, to answer an email that could easily be answered tomorrow or even the next day, that I feel like, you know what, if I have my phone there, I can just shoot off a response. And so just know you have to be super intentional to separate work and life. So you have just a great balance, so you are in sync with your family and the things that matter most to you. So your work is not taking over what you're passionate about and the things that you really care about in your life. And the fifth and final thing that I want to share that you need to know, and this is a true answer. I'm not just saying this. This is true. The fifth thing is this: being my own boss has been one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I don't just say, like, I have nothing to sell you, and I have no reason to say that. I'm not trying to act fake by saying that. I'm saying that because I wish someone would have sat me down a few years earlier and said, Alex, you need to make the jump right now. You need to go for it. And I had people that probably did tell me that at times. I was just comfortable. And again, there was reasons why I stayed, and it just worked out, and it was on God's timing. And I don't regret anything, but in some ways I could argue that, man, what would it look like if I would have made the jump 4 years earlier into self-employment? Where would I be now? And so I can't look back. I can't spend time looking back, and neither can you. But I would say it has been one of the coolest and best decisions, because it's just so, when you truly go in on something that you're passionate about, you care about, you love, and you see the value in it, man, like you're compelled to work so much harder at that thing and do excellent work. I think about all of the creative energy, I would say, that I had harnessed up at my W-2, my 9 to 5, that I wasn't really utilizing. Like I was just, in some ways, I was doing busy work, right? And we all need, maybe you're in a job right now where you're doing work where you don't feel very fulfilled in. And sometimes you just have to buck down and you have to provide for your family. You have to have a job that pays the bills, and that's just part of life. But one of the things that I've been very intentional about as a family and as we've made decisions is just being living very much under our means, being debt free. We do have a mortgage, but other than that, being debt free. And I think there is definitely value to that when you do talk about and think about making a jump, is when you don't have all these extra expenses and things, you can then really be intentional with your time, and you can be intentional with your resources. And so I think, all the creative energy that I had harnessed on the sidelines at my W-2 9 to 5 job, I'm now able to I now have the time to take that energy and then apply it towards what I really feel like I'm called to do. And so for me, what that looks like now practically is I do about 36 to 50 speaking engagements per year. That's all over the country. Sometimes it's local. But I do speaking engagements. And then I co-founded a company about a year and a half ago called writemybooks.com with Will Severns. He lives in Kansas City. It's writemybooks.com. And we have the chance to just help other, aspiring authors, speakers write and publish their book. And so it's been super fulfilling. And now I can use that creative energy to help some of these authors we're working with think about, okay, how can you get your message out there? How can we write a book that just stewards your story really well? And so that's now what I'm up to. And I'm just telling you, if you're someone listening that's thinking, man, I would love to make the jump, it's not all sunshine and flowers. Like there's days that are hard and you're thinking, man, like my buddy over here that, they're getting an automatic paycheck, every 2 weeks. And it's, your mind can go there on the hard days. But I'm telling you, from what I've experienced the last 8 months and hopefully for years to come, is that it's worth it. Like some of the sacrifices you make, whether it's health insurance or benefits or these things that maybe you miss out on, it has been 1,000% worth it. And I'm not, and again, I'm not trying to boast in any of this, or I'm just saying this because I know there's people listening that are trying to contemplate that decision. And so that if that's you, feel free to reach out. Would love to talk with you more about it. And I hope I can put out more content that speaks directly to the decision that you're going through, because for me, it was something that it took 4.5 years of a side hustle that I did on top of my job. Like I didn't go to my wife 4 years ago and say, hey babe, I'm going to quit my job and I hope we can make it work. It was like, no. It was 4.5 years of, hey, we're going to be intentional with saving money, with putting things aside so that when that time comes, then we're ready to all make the jump together. And so I think there is an absolute way to do that. There's a roadmap. And so I'm just passionate about helping other people do that and do the work that they feel called to and that they are passionate about. So my hope for you is that these 5 things encouraged you. Whether you're someone who's like, you know what, I want to stay in my job and I'm right where I need to be, that's awesome. I still think there's entrepreneur type mentalities that you can take with you in your day job. Like you can take some of these strategies with you in your day job and become that much better of an employee. And then for you, if you're listening and you're going, you know what, I've always wanted to be my own boss. Obviously, since the pandemic and everything, we've just seen so many people change what they're doing and so many more businesses have been started. And so if that's you, I just want to encourage you, start building the foundation right now and start taking some type of movement and action in that direction where you're headed, and don't just sit, oh man, I want to dream about this. It's like, okay, well, how can you start a side hustle while you're employed? How can you do something to make action and create traction so that when you do make the jump, it's that much smoother of a jump? I remember Dave Ramsey, my good friend Kim Ernest, she was one of the people I talked to, and she had a great analogy. She said, Dave Ramsey, what he says is that whenever you're considering making a jump of any kind, you want to make sure that your boats, like metaphorically, if you have a boat, let's say you work at a day job and that day job is a boat, right? So you're in the water, you're on this boat, you're on this work boat. And there's this other boat over here that's, maybe for you becoming your own boss, making the jump, going all in on something. Well, to go from one boat to the other, Dave Ramsey would say, you need to make sure that when you make the jump that there's not a splash. You need to make sure that you don't sink, right? And so what you need to make sure of is that your boats are tied together and closely aligned and docked together. And something my friend said is, she said, when I look at your situation, your boats are not only together, but now they're starting to cause friction. And so she's like, now you need to decide. And that was really good advice for me to hear, because I knew that it was time. And maybe if you're listening, maybe it's time for you. And I just want to encourage you, don't ignore those feelings that you're having. Don't ignore those thoughts of pursuing that work, because man, it's so fulfilling. Like I said, not every day is perfect, but it's so fulfilling to know that you're at least moving the direction of the way that you are called. And so I hope these 5 things encourage you wherever you're at on that spectrum. And I hope that you continue, no matter what, if you're in a day job or if you're self-employed, you continue to make a difference every single day and live according to the calling which you've been called. And so go out, have a great day, and keep making a difference.